What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the KM Mitch Talk video blog series. This is blog number 12 slash episode 12, whatever you want to say. And the reason I do these is not to rant and rave, not to think I know more than everybody, but to actually just contribute things. There's a ton of things out, so things that I'm saying is nothing new. There's a ton of great websites and blog sites and video tutorials, all of that stuff on audio engineering, and a lot of people are way smarter and way better than I am. So although I think I am valuable and very talented, and know what I'm talking about, there's people who's always better and always more experience and more knowledge at stuff. So yeah, but what I want to talk about on this is specifically to mixing engineers or anybody who does mixing in music, right? So what is mixing in the first place? If you have no idea, because people get mixing and mastering confused. So let's kind of talk about the differences between those. But mixing is when we're taking a group of final recordings, right? So we're taking, let's say if it's, no matter what song it is, we're taking everything about that song, the final recordings, and we're treating those on an individual basis and bringing a whole picture together. So I kind of refer to it as mixing is where we're taking a whole bunch of pieces of a puzzle and we're piecing that together so that this puzzle comes together. And so we're treating individual tracks, we're subgrouping some tracks together, then treating those as a whole in a subgroup and a sub piece of the overall mix and overall song. So there's automation involved in mixing. There's a ton of stuff that goes on. Mixing is a beastly process, and definitely the most time-consuming process in the audio engineering piece. Tracking can be, especially with live bands, I mean, that can be, people can take a long time on one song, but I definitely think mixing is probably the most tedious and time-consuming process, and probably the most important process out of tracking, mixing, and mastering. What is mastering? So mixing, we take the final recordings and put that piece together. Mastering is where we take the final mixes, in terms of, is where we take a final mix or final mixes, right? If we're doing a whole album, and we make sure that those final mixes all work together. So one is micro and one is macro. So mixing, I'm thinking about how does this kick and this snare sound with the vocal. Mastering, I'm thinking in terms of the whole album, the whole song itself. And so it's different skill sets, different, they're different. Like in 2015, you have to be able to do somewhat of both, just because of budgets. But, normally there should be a dedicated mixing engineer and a dedicated mastering engineer. But obviously, like I said, budgets are just so low these days where there's not really that option. I'm a mastering engineer. 80% of the time I find myself doing mastering, but like 70 to 80%. But there is some times where I find myself mixing and mastering for clients, but in the majority of that time when I'm mastering, sometimes I get frustrated and I get disappointed because, let's just face it, like, the whole point of mixing is dealing with stuff on an individual process. Obviously, you have, there's some tricks and things that you want to do to the whole mix. But when you're mixing, you should want to deal with stuff on an individual base as possible. So a part of the mixing process, you have what's called a mix bus or a master bus. Meaning that all of those, say you have 50 tracks in a mix, right, in a song. All of those 50 tracks have to be summed up and go to a place what we know as a 2-track, right? Which is what you would play as an MP3 or a WAV file on a CD. Is where you have the left and right. That's what would be played in a car, on earbuds, on computer speakers, etc. So all of those tracks in the song have to be summed down to what's called a 2-track. And in order for that to happen, it has to go to an auxiliary or a bus track that we call our mix bus, or some call our master bus. Same thing, stereo bus. There's multiple names for them. And in today's world, mastering engineers and the mixing engineers are using some of the same tools, because plugins have opened a world versus years ago. Mixing engineers use their stuff, mastering engineers use their stuff. Like, when I mix, I use certain tools, and when I master, I use certain tools. Like, two totally different sides of software, two totally different focuses. Like, I don't get the two confused or mixed up. Like, two different skills, two different purposes. And nowadays, instead of mixing engineers actually processing on an individual basis and getting stuff to sound as good as they can, they'll do an okay job on individual parts in the mix, and then they'll get to the master bus and process the crap out of the master bus and then send it to master, and then the master engineer has no headroom. There's things that's done that's hard to undo, right? Maybe stuff is compressed too much. They try to, instead of going back and EQing a vocal a little warmer or a little brighter, you try to do it on the overall. Or instead of making the bass or 808 or kick drum hit and knock a little harder, you try to do it on the master bus. Now, master bus processing is incredible. There's obviously things like people like to obviously put bus compressors on. Bus compressors can be an incredible thing. SSL emulations, Neve emulations, actual hardware analog compressors that we have. Like, they can be incredible things and they serve their purpose. But my whole point is that if you're sending your stuff out, and like I said, I'm a master engineer majority of the time. So if I'm receiving mixes that's over-processed too much on a master bus, it limits me to be able to do my magic to your mixing, to your song. Rather, you're the one mixing it or somebody else is mixing. So my challenge to mixing engineers is, the whole point of being able to do the mixing process is to bring all of those individual pieces together of the puzzle and put those together and make a whole picture, like, and articulate something to the world. So take advantage of that. So this is called Mix Engineers Take Advantage of the Process. You need to take advantage of the mixing process. The whole point of having a mixing engineer and a mixing process is to individually treat things, EQ, compress, reverb, whatever your special tricks are. Do that on an individual basis and bring that whole picture together. Then send it to the master engineer, and he deals with that whole. So I'm not saying not to process your master bus, but I'm saying do as little as stereo bus processing as possible. Like, if you don't have to do stereo bus processing, don't do it. Try to work as hard as possible on the individual elements that you want to shine in that mix. If you want more low end on bass, treat the bass, treat the kick drum. Don't just treat the whole mix because you feel like it needs that, because it can hurt. Even being able to do mid-side processing and multi-band processing and mastering, we're still limited, even with those flexibilities. I mean, we have stem mastering to where mixes are grouped up, say maybe the main vocal on one track, background vocals, drums on one track, bass, instruments on another. Even doing stem mastering, we're still limited. In most cases, standard mastering with just a stereo file that's a 2-track is what's necessary anyways, because of how technology has allowed us to process stuff in mastering. You can do a lot of crazy stuff and do incredible stuff with just a stereo track. I prefer that anyways. I prefer that the mix to be as great and amazing as possible. So mixing engineers, take advantage of the process. Don't work the crap out your stereo bus. so much because you're lazy and don't want to do it. No, that's not the point of mixing. The point of mixing is to treat things on an individual basis. Take those final tracks that are recorded, bring them together, send it off to get mastered. So hopefully this doesn't offend people, but it challenges mix engineers, even myself as a mix engineer. It challenges us to do the best that we can in mixing and let the mastering process and master engineer do what it's designed to do. So we all have things that we're designed for and roles we need to play, and we all need to play those roles to the best of our ability. All right, y'all, go make some good music.